Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Success in Sales, Hacks and Chats with Mike McDonald. I have a very special guest. We have Thierry Clarke joining me today. Thierry, thanks for being a guest on the show.
Pleasure to be here, Michael. Thank you very much for inviting me.
So for those people that have no idea who you are, share with us a little bit about you and what you do.
Cool. So I'm Thierry Clarke. I'm the founder and CEO of Investor Connected. And that's a platform that helps entrepreneurs to get investment ready and provides tools as well for investors and funders looking for funding. And we basically provide the bridge that that connects those two sides of the market together.
And you're going to share with us the three main things that we need to storytell for funding. So this is for people that want to get funding from investors, and you sort of give people the storyboard, if you will, that'll help them do that, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. So if it's okay, Michael, I'll give you a little bit of kind of my history
Yeah, sure.
and tell you where I got these kind of ideas from. So I spent 15 years working in the investment management world. And I was, at one point in time, I headed up a region looking after 23 markets. I spent a lot of time on the road, speaking to different professional investors and speaking to the investors that I was working with, and also speaking to entrepreneurs that had been successful and talking to them about investments. And what I realized throughout this whole process was that investors speak a very, very different language. They're always speaking about opportunities. They want to hear what's going to happen in the future. They want to be able to believe in something. And it's really, I was sitting down with my boss at one point in time and talking to him about how to put together presentations and what was the best way of putting together sales pitches for investors. And the one thing he said to me is, you know, Thierry, it's all just about telling a story. And I've thought about that a lot. And it's very, very true. Whenever you're getting in front of an investor, it is all about telling a story. It's all about taking people on a journey from where you are today to a believable destination in the future, and how you're going to make that journey. And so when talking to investors, you need to think about that story and about how you're going to take people, or how you're going to take them from today to somewhere in the future where you both hopefully make a ton of money.
Well, that seems, it seems straightforward, at least in the way that you explain it. In the back of my mind, I thought, okay, storytelling, okay, yeah, we get it. But for some people, that's like a loaded word, storytelling. Like, people go in with a lot of assumptions around what storytelling is and how to phrase it and how to structure it and all those things. So I think at least that people can think storytelling can be quite straightforward and not realize how hard it can be, at least when they first try it. And then there are people out there that think it's hard, and then when they try it, they realize, it's actually quite straightforward. So you've got three things that, at least in your experience working with investors, and you've got this platform which does just that, connects businesses with investors. What sort of keys do you think that we need? You say you've got three, so what's number one?
Right. So, yeah. So in terms of taking people on a journey, there's the three things that I talk to people about are the first thing is your goal. So where are you going? What's the destination that you're taking your investors on to? The second thing is how are you going to get there? What is your strategy? That's the kind of meat, let's put it, of the conversation. And then finally, what are your resources? What are the things that you need to achieve your vision, your goal, and the strategy that you're talking about putting in place? So those are the broad themes that we talk about in terms of putting together the story. Just like a story, any other story has a beginning, middle, and end. When you're talking about pitching, there's these three things: your goal, your strategy, and the resources. So if you'll allow me to kind of dig into that in a bit more detail, Michael. So what do I mean when talking about your goal? The first thing that I talk to entrepreneurs about is what I call the equation. So, and this is effectively, 1 + 1 = cash, right? The first one is, what is your problem? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? And you need to make the investors and the people that you're speaking to feel the pain of the problem that you're trying to solve. Is it a gap in the market? Is it something that's not being catered for? Is it something that's really difficult to do that you think should be a lot easier to do? So what is the problem? That needs to be really clear, and the clearer it is, and the more the investors can empathize with that problem, the better it is for you. The second thing is what does your business do in terms of, what is its functionality? What is the product or service that you provide? And finally, how does your business solve that problem? So that equation is really the kind of formation of what many people call the elevator pitch. So what is the key kind of seed of any business? What are the kind of key characteristics of it? So that's the first thing that we tell people to talk about, and it's important that you get that right, especially the problem side of things, because that's what's going to help you engage your investors and get people's interest.
Well, when it comes to the idea behind pitching to investors, then, I mean, at least in my mind, because a lot of people spend an awful lot of time trying to get their elevator pitch right, because with like speed networking and all those sorts of things, and everything seems to be at least about the elevator pitch. Those first couple of sentences that will grab your attention and make you at the very least keen to engage with that person for whatever reason, usually to do with the problem that they solve. But because people do that, because people have this practice, if you will, this constant work of trying to perfect everything to get the attention, at least, of investors. This is before they say yeah, I'd imagine. This isn't them signing on the dotted line for these sort of things. So how do people go that one step further to ensure that, okay, they've got the elevator pitch, but how do people stand out? What's the next step after that? Because people don't just want their attention; they actually want the investors to say yeah.
Yeah. So after you've got the kind of the equation sorted out and that elevator pitch, the second thing that we always tell people to focus on is what we call the market opportunity. So what is your target market? Who are you targeting in terms of this particular idea or concept? And what is what we call service addressable market? So what is the actual market that you can access with your product right now? After that, you then start talking about, have you validated your business proposition? So do you have customers? If you don't have customers, do you have any feedback from your potential clients to say, yeah, this is a great idea, we do need that? Ultimately, every investor is looking for some kind of validation that not only is it a good idea, but it's needed in the market. And they want to see the size and scale of the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And depending upon the type of investor, the scalability of an opportunity is a big factor in terms of their decision as to whether they move forward. But they also want to see how you're doing and how you're accessing that. What traction have you got? What validation have you got that this is actually a good idea? You can have an amazing kind of problem and solution and kind of equation statement, but the market opportunity might be tiny. And therefore you won't have the chance to build a sizable business. If you can't build a sizable business, then you won't be able to provide a good return to your investors. So there needs to be that interplay between a great idea and the right size, depending upon what investor's going in.
Does it depend on the amount that the investor gets back in terms of their investment, i.e., you can go like top end, say like luxury service or product or whatever it is. You therefore might not need a big scale because the return on the investment could be quite high if they have enough to validate it. So is there a balance whereby, okay, each investor has their own particular, like what their priority is? For some people might invest in low end because it's cheaper or more affordable, but then they can move enough to justify their investment in terms of profit margins and all those sort of things. So how do you bridge the gap between trying to get to the values of the investor to try and get that across to them?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Each investor will have their own criteria that they're looking at and their own size and scale. I mean, ultimately, there's a playoff, right? In terms of with regards to profitability, there's a playoff between profit margin and size of sale and volume, right? So
Yeah.
you can sell 10 million things at £1 each, or you can sell one thing at £1 million, and you might end up making the same amount of money. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's all about the profitability of each business and its ability to grow its profit margins over time. So right. if an investor's putting in, especially if you're looking at, for example, a venture capital investor, if they're putting in, £200,000-300,000, they want to make sure that you've got any business that they're investing in has got enough capacity and capability to be able to make, 10, 15, 20, 100 million pounds in the next 5 years so that they can make a decent return, or the ability to potentially be bought by someone else for a valuation which is 5 times what they bought into the company at. So it's always, investors are always looking for opportunity. They're always looking for that return on their investment. And you're absolutely right. It is an interplay between size and scale. And there's no real magic formula. Every investor will have a different thing that they're looking for. Some angels, for example, are interested in being part of something. They want to be part of a business. They want to pass on their knowledge. And so it's not necessarily just about the financial return. It's also about their ability to impact the business and their ability to put something into that business as well. So it really does depend in terms of what the investor is looking for.
Yeah, that I can see how that would make sense, because there are people that do want the money, there are people that want the impact and want to actually change a country or a town or whatever the case is. Because if you make enough money, then that level of impact is actually possible. Because you can do an awful lot if the money's there.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad to say, but it's very true. Money can often buy you influence. Success can open doors. Success often breeds success. So one of the key things that a lot of entrepreneurs need are gatekeepers or door openers. So people that can get you into, XYZ retailer, or get you access to a manufacturer in another country that can produce your products a lot cheaper, or can get you access to a fleet of salespeople, or whatever it is, or lend more credibility to your business, so that when you go out to sell, you can say, we've got XYZ person that also supports our business. So yeah, there's lots of impacts other than financial that an investor or a funder can bring to your business.
So is validation then one of the main things? Because from what you've said, this element of being able to predict things, this element of being able to say, right, this is how much we're pretty much guaranteed for the next 5 years. This makes it more likely that the investor's going to invest their time, money, experience, expertise, or whatever it may be. But then you've got this element of, well, if you can't provide that, then what else have you got? So is validation one of the main things that you need, whether it be market research at least, or even just a scale of demand? Or, I mean, how small would you say people could realistically get in terms of validation for it to be like a box ticked? Because some people might only be able to get market research on their product or service. But then there are people out there that might do a crowdfunding thing and get people to to donate somewhat to a cause or a product or a service or whatever it is, so that at least in my mind is a higher level of validation, I guess. People are able to crowdfund something and the investor goes, okay, well, that's more validated than someone that just has market research on their product or their service or offering or whatever it is. So is there a minimum dose or minimum requirement for validation?
Well, the honest answer is that the greater your validation, the higher the value of your product, or the higher the value of your business, right? The more you can show that it's servicing a need and it's fixing a problem or solving a problem, the higher your valuation is, and the more valuable your company is. If you don't have the validation, then it's far more conceptual. And that will have a significant impact on the amount of value you can expect, or the valuation you can expect for your business. So yeah, it's really important to validate that market, the market opportunity. It's also important to place yourself or to put yourself in the right context in relation to your competition. How do you fit into the competitive landscape, and how are you different from your competitors? Because that's the other thing that in this kind of goal space, the first kind of area that we talk about, which is a goals competition, and how you differentiate yourself and how you wish to differentiate yourself from your competition is really important. The other thing that's worth mentioning is it's also really important to kind of identify whether you have anything that is defensible as a competitive edge. And what do I mean by that? Things like intellectual property. Do you have any patents or any trademarks or any copyrights that mean that it's going to be much more difficult for people to copy what you're doing, and it puts you ahead of your competition? So these are the kind of things that really help in terms of the valuation of your business, and in terms of investors turning around and saying, yeah, I want to take a closer look in terms of whether this makes sense, and does the journey, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Is the journey worth taking?
So how do we make sure that the journey is worth taking then? So when we go from this idea of the goal, okay, we've got the destination, we've got how we fit in, we've got this element of validation ticked, we've got the idea is officially like needed, it's wanted, it solves that problem. But when we say, right, okay, well, how do we get to that destination? What sort of steps work best?
Exactly. So once you've got the goal, you know where you're going. It's all about execution, and this is the next stage of kind of due diligence or validation or consideration that an investor will look at. And the first thing they'll look at is your business model. So they'll look to see, how are you making money? Are you transacting? Are you selling things? Are you making commission? Do you have some kind of subscription service? Are you making money from advertising? Is it something that we haven't even thought of? And then they'll want to look at the unit economics. So what's the price of your product or service, and what are the costs of your product or service? So they'll want to look at your cost of acquisition. They'll want to look at how much it costs to produce, and they'll want to figure out what your profit margin is on a unit by unit basis. So understanding the nature of the business model, your engine for making money, is really important. And sometimes that's where people fall over a little bit. They don't necessarily have their numbers put together there, but that's the next step in terms of the kind of strategy. After that, it then becomes a question of looking at what some people call go-to-market strategy. I'm much more simplistic. I say it's sales and marketing. So how do you plan on attracting and retaining clients? What sales channels are you going to use? How will you market your business? Offline, online? These are all things that need to be considered. And finally, how does that translate into kind of growth plans over time? So investors love numbers. They want to see where you're planning on getting to, and they'll look at your sales and marketing and your growth plans in relation to your unit economics to see whether those two two things make sense. And then the final thing in terms of the strategy is, do you have the right team in place to execute it? So how many people do you need? Who are the key people? What relevant experience do they have in either the industry that you're talking about, or the sector, or the niche that you're talking about, or just in general in terms of building successful businesses? What history do they have in kind of starting up or scaling up businesses? And how will they apply that to the business that you're pitching for? So the team is fundamentally important in terms of the ability to execute the vision and the strategy.
Is it possible to have, because you mentioned the business model when it came to the strategy, and it seems important at least to get the business model nailed down somewhat. There are loads of people listening to this that might just have one product, one service, this is the price, and all those sorts of things. But there is an argument, at least in my mind, for people that have like multiple different products and services at multiple different price points, and they all sort of work together as more of an ecosystem rather than just being one person, one service, one price, and away you go. From what you've told me and everything else, I'm sort of processing it all, Thierry, to be honest. And it seems like there is an ideal scenario. It seems like there is something out there that investors would prefer, or there's an ideal thing. So if I run this past you can sort of dissect it a little bit, and then we'll see where we go. Right, so imagine there's a company, a business, maybe they've got, it could be a membership thing. They've got memberships that are in every month. They've also got packages that are like every 3 months and 6 months. They could have like a more of a merchandise scenario, so something that could be low cost, but the profit margin could be enough, something that they would sell to those people, like almost like, I don't want to say upsells, but the things that like enhance the experience. You know, like if you join our package, say, you might also want this, I don't know, t-shirt or a mug or a free ticket to this event or whatever it is. So they've got a list of add-ons, if you will, as well as being a member of something, and then having packages and things that could be more expensive as well. So how does that play out in terms of having the multiple price points and the multiple different ways that you could spend money, or at least earn the company more money?
None of that is bad. Obviously, the more options that you have for generating revenue, that's great. The question is of strategy, right? And what is your strategy, and how is it defined, and how clear is it, and whether an investor can get their head around it. Let's look at Airbnb and Uber, right? Conceptually, they have very simplistic revenue models, right? So with Airbnb, you rent a place for a day, they take commission. Yeah, great, it's easy. You can get your head around that. It's a volume business, it's a commission-led model, but they don't just do that, they do other bits and pieces. With Uber, again, conceptually, it's very easy. It's a commission-led model. They take commission from every trip that happens. However, when you dig into the model and you dig into the business model of Uber, it's much more complicated. There's a standard, there's a starting fee, there's surge pricing, there's this, there's that. There's a number of different ways that Uber are able to make money. It's a question of clarity, and it's a question of making sure that investors understand your business model and understand how you're going to make money, and it's clear to them the path for you to be able to make money. Again, it's about storytelling. It's about making sure that they believe what you're saying and they're following you along that journey.
I quite like the way that it's kind of complicated in the way that it looks on paper maybe, but then how you describe it and how it comes across and how you storytell the business model and how you describe it and the words that you use and how simplistic you make it tends to come across in how clear things are. So if you can describe it and get it across in a couple of sentences, then that is better than, going off on a bit of a tangent with diagrams and models and all those sort of things to make things too complicated. So how would you sort of see things looking when it comes to, it can be complex on paper, but then how you describe it can be as simple as you want. How do you look at that? Because you mentioned Uber. Uber seems quite simple, but then when you break it down into its component parts, some people, it'll probably go over their head. Others might have to have a long rest afterwards. So how do you sort of bridge the gap between it being complicated when you break it down, but then simple when you try and describe it?
So I guess there's two parts to this. So number one, whenever you're doing financial forecasting, you want the detail, right? So all of the things that you just mentioned in terms of going down to the detail, different product lines, etc., anything that you are talking about in terms of assumption can be expressed in financials, and that's the place to do it. That's the place to get complex, right? And that's the place to describe things to investors. However, when it comes to your kind of business plan and your high level business plan, it's best to keep it, short and simple, short and sweet. It's the KISS principle. You've just got to make sure that people get it and people understand it. If I came to you and I said, come and work for me, and in order to work for me, what you're going to do is you're going to do X, Y, Z, and then the pay structure is I'm going to pay you, £5 an hour for this, and then if you do this, I'm going to give you 20% of that commission, plus if you do something else, I'm going to give you 15% of this, plus anytime you go and market us elsewhere, you get an advertising commission. All of a sudden your head's going, I have no idea how much money I'm going to make from this, right? Yeah. So just think of that, right? When you're talking to investors, you're doing the same kind of thing. They want to know, right, how much of X are you going to sell? How many units of X are going to sell? How much roughly is it going to be for? And great, okay, you might be able to make money from here, there, and everywhere, but it's what is the core thing that's going to drive your business model forward? And how is that going to work? Is it you're going to charge a subscription for using your service? Is it that you're going to sell, you're going to have, provide X amount of haircuts every week? Whatever it is, there are obviously ancillary bits and pieces that you can put through, but it's just about making it clear what the core parts of your business model are, so that investors get it. The minute somebody is confused about your business is the minute you've lost them.
I quite like the way you mentioned that. It seems like if you get the core down, at least you get the main parts of it. You get the things that are easy to explain. They want to be the core things. Like if you can't explain it simply, the main aspects of the business, then I think all of the extra things would probably make things harder as opposed to easier. So from what you said there, if you can communicate at least the core aspects of how the business is going to run, how it's going to make money, how it's going to spend money, and all of those things, then that seems to be what makes things easier for investors to at least get their head around it and think, okay, is this worth investing in?
Exactly. It's these are key kind of communication concepts, but people forget it. And the reason that people forget it when it comes to pitching is because for an entrepreneur, it's your baby, right? You love the business, you know it inside out. And for you, it makes complete sense, right? You know that, all of these weird commission structures, but everybody else is looking at you like, I have no idea what you're saying. You're talking Martian to me, right? So it's about simplicity. It's about clarity. We ran a pitching event in London last Tuesday, and the investors kept saying on the panel, I love, like the pitch. It was very clear, could understand what you were going. Anytime they got hung up on something, that's where the questioning starts. And that's where it's kind of, can I get my head around this a little bit more? So the easier and simpler you can make it, the better it is, the more it will resonate with investors and funders in general.
But once you get past all that, so like you can break something down into like 2 or 3 sentences if you wanted to, but then when the investor digs in, he's still probably not going to want to find a mess inside, if that makes sense. Like, there's no point in wrapping it in simplistic wrapping if inside's a mess. So
Well,
so it seems like having to. I could be completely wrong, because sometimes once they've got the core aspects in place, maybe a bit like yourself as the owner, they might start to see all the connections work, and they might start to see, oh, well, it starts to make sense to me now, even though some people that don't know what they know, right, it could be a complete mess to them. So does having this communicated well mean that the investor understands the, air quotes, chaos as much as the owner would?
Yes and no. The honest answer is, when we're talking about pitching to investors, you've got maybe 5 or 10 minutes, right, to get their attention. If you're lucky, you might get 15, and then after that, it's Q&A. It's them exploring the details that they want to know. And then after that, it tends to be a much deeper dive, the due diligence phase, where they'll look at your legals. They'll want to look at your financials. That's where they want to see the detail, right? They'll want to see that detail in your financial models and all of that kind of stuff. Do they need it explained in great detail? Do they need a 50-page business plan? The answer is probably no. They just don't have the time to kind of go through that, Investors want to, read Spot Goes to the Beach, not War and Peace, when it comes to an investment proposal. So you've got to keep it simple at a high level to get their interest, and only then, once they're invested, not naturally with money, but once they're invested emotionally or they connect to it, that's when they go into detail. That's when you can start explaining loyalty systems and whatever it might be that you have, and the complexities of your business model, or the nuances of your business model that might mean that you make an extra 10%. But what they want to know is how you're going to make the 90% of your of your revenue, right? And where most of your expenses are going to go, most of your costs are going to go. So those are the key kind of things there.
Well, we've gone through an awful lot, Thierry. We've gone through having the goal in mind, the destination in mind. You need to have a vision for where you want the business or the company to end up. You need, how do we get there? So we're talking business models, we're talking financials, we're talking keeping it as simple as possible so that the investor can wrap their head around it. Otherwise, you're going to be being fired a lot of questions, I would imagine. And then it's about the resources, so the people, the money, how much time you're going to put into it, having, have you got capable hands or not? Or the team seems to be very important. You need to make sure that you've got the equation to do with the goal as well and everything else. It was about, how do you ultimately solve the problem that people have, and why you as well. I'd imagine in some respects it's okay, well, how do you separate yourself? How are you positioned in a way that people can do that? So how would you wrap this up for us? How would you tie it all neatly together with a bow that is storytelling, and how would you like this to go off?
So the one thing that we haven't mentioned, which is really important, so I think it's probably, and it's kind of the end of the story, right? Which is the funding. So let's assume that you've got the funding. Every investor is going to want to know how on earth you plan on spending that, and whether your plan for spending it is a good use of their money, right? So
I like that, yeah.
How much is it going to cost to execute the strategy, and where will the funds be distributed? So, for example, are you going to be paying yourself a massive salary and not spending money on, other staff or on marketing costs or sales costs? Is it, are you spending it on product? What is the breakup of that? How is that investment going to be used? And it doesn't matter whether you're an equity investor or a loan provider. Everybody's going to want to know how you plan on spending that money.
Yeah.
The other thing that people want to know is, and investors want to know, especially from the equity side of things, is how much do you think your business is worth? What is the value that you've placed upon your business? And therefore, what are you going to offer in exchange? Are you going to offer, what percentage of the business are you going to offer? Or if you're, a loan giving out, you're accepting a loan, how much are you prepared to pay in terms of interest? All of these things are kind of important that you need to know at the end of the day, because, all of that stuff will decide whether finally they might want to kind of go forward and start, thinking about investing. So they need to follow you. The funding point is your punchline. If you're a sales guy, it's kind of, right, I like it. How much does it cost? You've gone into the showroom, you've seen the car, the salesman's talked to you about all of the extras and how amazing it is. You've gone on your test drive. What's the price? Okay, so that's the funding bit. That's your kind of your money shot. That's the end of the story. But it's an important end, and that needs to be strong as well.
Yeah, from what you said then, it seems, at least to me, that the funding isn't really the end. Like, so the investor will want to know, okay, if we say yeah, then what? If we turn around and say, okay, we will give you this much for this much of the business, or whatever the case is, whatever the agreement is, if they say, okay, yeah, we'll do it. So how are you going to spend our money then? And then if you can't really answer that, if you've not thought about that, then that's something that you're going to have to deal with, or something that you're going to have to accept that you don't know. And if the investor doesn't know how you're going to spend their money, or their time, or their advice, or whatever it is, depending on, I guess, how the investor is investing, then it's like, okay, well, why should they invest if you don't know what they're going to invest in? Because if it is time, or it is advice, then, what are they going to be advising on? What's the project? What's the vision of the business moving forward? And then if it is money, well, I'd imagine at least you're going to need to know how you're going to allocate the funds and all those sorts of things. So
exactly.
So yeah, it does seem like we do all the things that we said before to get them to say yeah, which is fine, but then you would then need to know what happens after that. Otherwise, you're still going to be snookered, because I'd imagine the investor's always going to be in a position whereby they can always retract it, or they can always come up with a way of saying, right, well, you don't know what you're going to do, so I'm going to have to pull out somewhat because it's not working.
Exactly, and this is the point. I guess one of the points that I try to make to a lot of people. Nobody likes business planning. Right? Everybody hates it, sitting down and writing business plans. Every entrepreneur wants to be up and doing stuff, and that's the right way to be. However, it's you wouldn't go on a journey without knowing where you were going and the destination that you were going to, the route that you were going to be driving to get there in your sat nav. You wouldn't go without any money to be able to put petrol in your car, etc., etc., etc. And it's the same with running a business. You need to have that plan, and you need to know where you're going and how you're going to get there. And sitting down and writing it down, there's no better way of articulating and finding holes in your plan, and making where the dots don't quite add up. And it's important to get those right before you, and it helps stop you making mistakes. And that's the key thing that business planning does. I mean, I jokingly say to a lot of people that I'm trying to make business planning sexy. I'm failing miserably in that regard, but it's important. If it's not sexy, it's important.
Yeah, I like when you said that it's about stopping making the mistakes. And one of the things that kind of sticks out to me, that's just something that I was thinking about while you were saying that, was if you don't plan for the mistakes when they happen, then the mistake will impact you more than it probably should or would if you had the plan in place. So it's kind of like you prepare for something to happen, knowing that you'll do everything that you can to prevent it as well, to do like the prevention stuff and whatever the case is. But if it does happen, you still need to plan for if it does happen. Otherwise, going to be a very long-winded way of saying this now, but if you haven't got the plan for when it does happen, then when it does happen, it'll impact you more than if you had to plan for it if it happened.
Exactly. And you've got to. It's about making sure you know the known unknowns, right? What you might not know who you're going to hire in 2 years' time, but you probably know that, okay, if my business grows, I'm going to need to hire another person. And you probably know that, hiring that person is going to cost you X amount of money. So you need to plan for that, because if you come to 2 years' time and you need to hire that person and either you don't have the funds or you haven't allocated enough funds, or you haven't allocated, you need to go out and raise more funds, that's going to be a problem. Whereas if you plan up front, then okay, I need that money. So I need to either make sure that I'm apportioning that money for the future, whatever it is. But having the plan means that you can make sure that you don't end up in those tricky situations.
I think that is an amazing way to end, Thierry. I think we've covered an awful lot. I don't think I've wrote that much before during a podcast. So yeah, only time will tell. So before we shoot off, before we finish, I thought I'd ask if people wanted to find out a bit more about yourself, Thierry, where can people go? So if you're on social media, now is your chance to share that. If you're not and you just have a website, then you can share that as well. So if someone wants to find out about you, where can we go?
So the website for the business is investorconnected.com. If they want to ping us an email and ask questions, info@investorconnected.com. You can follow IC_tweets on Twitter. We're Investor Connected on Facebook. And on LinkedIn as well. So you can find us all there. Me personally, I don't do much on social media. I probably should do more, but I'm a bit of a recluse on social media. So you can I'm on Twitter. I think it's Thierry FN Clarke. I don't know.
I think everyone's on Twitter.
I'm on Facebook somewhere as well, and I'm on LinkedIn. So I'm sure you can find me. Thierry Clarke's not a particularly common name, so if you see a big guy with glasses, that's probably me.
As long as you don't go for the footballer, I think you'll be all right.
Exactly. Although I wish I had his wealth and influence. That would be nice.
All right, we've got one last question for you, Thierry, and I ask all the guests this, so those of you that are listening will probably know what I'm going to ask. And it's, what would you like the world to know about you that it doesn't already know?
Bloody hell, Michael. That's a pretty heavy question for us.
It is, yeah.
What do I want the world to know about me that they don't already know?
I mean, we have had answers like I like chocolate cake, and we have answers like classical music is my favourite. So I think as the show progresses and as we get to the hundreds and the thousands, we're going to have like wacky and wonderful answers. So if you want to start us off on those, which by the way you won't have, we've already had wacky and wonderful already, feel free to share whatever you want.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I don't know. Do you know what? I live my life as pretty much an open book. But I've done some crazy stuff. I've walked the Inca Trail. I've presented in a nightclub. I did a business presentation in a nightclub on a stage which had two pole dancing cages on either side and talking about investments in the middle of Russia. That was an interesting event.
I'm sure it was.
I don't know. What else? I'm a drummer.
Right, okay.
But I'm a drummer.
Interesting.
I'm a pretty good cook. I don't know. What else do you want to know? That's. But I'm not sure whether the world knows that about me. But there you go. It's not weird. It's not particularly wacky.
So you're a drummer, and you've been trying to get nightclubs and pole dancers involved with investors, which it's not completely unheard of, I'd imagine.
No, not really. To be honest with you, it's actually more normal than it sounds. Although this one wasn't my doing. I arranged an event with a client at a hotel which hadn't been finished being built, And so they had to quickly relocate the event to another venue, and the only venue they could find was a nightclub. And this particular nightclub had these two cages on the for dancers on the side of the stage, and then it had a projection screen in the middle. So I was standing next to a cage talking about economics and all sorts of crazy stuff. And then there was a dinner and stuff, and then it was really strange because there was a bar which had a bath on the side of it. And
Right.
yeah, I know. And at about 11 o'clock, a scantily clad lady came down and went into the bath and started having a shower and playing with bubble bath. So it was definitely something that my company wouldn't have agreed to sponsor if they'd have known it was happening, and I didn't know it was happening. So yeah, that took me by a bit of surprise. So not many people know that.
No, I mean, well, I imagine they do now. Which is part of why we do it. That's why I asked the question. It's about getting to know people in a way that no one has known them before. And I think you would be surprised at how many people right now are probably thinking, "Oh, I might ask the local pole dancing place if they'll have Thierry on."
Talk about investments, yeah.
But you never know. You never know. All right, for people that are listening, make sure you do subscribe. Make sure you share this one out. Tell people about the show because people need to know about Thierry's adventures. And if you want to find out more about him, feel free to nip over to his website or social media as well. For those of you that have listened before, hello, welcome back. And Thierry, thanks for being a guest. I'm sure we'll keep in touch.
Indeed, Michael. And yeah, let me know if you want me to come on again.